kids. So when Ellie asked me to speak about parenting, I felt that it was a great honor. And it's a very hard subject because parenting is a very individualized. The way you work with your children is very individualized. Every child is different, every parent is different, every house is different. You good? Okay. But there are certain general rules that cover all of parenting. Baruch Hashem, I have been a teacher in the classroom for 40 years. I actually became a teacher at 20 years old, pretty much grew up with my students, and I've learned a lot of what they need from their parents, and I've of course spent a lot of time with parents and learned a lot about what they need from their children. I first want to thank Madraigos. I never met the rabbi. We talked to each other, and I know that in the 5 towns and in Chicago, all over the world pretty much, Madraigos has a huge effect. Thank you very much to the rabbi, and of course to Ellie for asking me to speak. And Ellie Sheva is an Naava girl, so she's helped me through many, many, many different years. And also I want to just thank the doctor for coming to speak. So I want to start off with this. All the speeches and books and therapy and psychology and rabbis speaking about parenting is worthless if you do not give your child the most important thing in the world. And every time I come to speak, and I speak in my seminary, and I ask this question: what is the most important thing in the world that you can give your child? Everybody answers pretty much the same answer. Love. Love fixes all the other letters, ADHD, all the letters that we have floating around. Love, it's the fixer. What does that mean? What does love mean? What does giving your child love mean? And when I ask that question, many people shake their head. Unconditional love. I don't really need a mic. I speak loud enough without a mic, to tell you the truth. I have a very loud voice.
Let's keep it.
You want to keep it? Yeah? Okay. So what does love mean? What does it mean? What does the word mean? Does it mean buying toys? Does it mean buying your kid toys? Does it mean giving him a kiss and a hug? What does it mean to love someone? So here's the answer. And with this, psychology, books, coaching, everything works. And the answer is, the one thing that a human being in this world cannot live 1/1,000,000th of a second without. You can live without food, some of us anyway, for 1/1,000,000th of a second without. You can live without air, you can hold your breath, you can swim underwater, you can live without drinking. So some of the girls in my seminary said, you can live without love. I'm like, I know a lot of people that are not loved and they're living.
Just try to use the mic.
I should try to use the mic because it's recording. Okay. And then there was one girl in my class, she was like trying to make an impression. She wanted to get an Aleph and Hashkafa. She said, you can't live without God. And I'm like, I know a lot of atheists that are living without God. And the answer is time. When you have no more time, you are no longer on this world. the most precious thing that a human being has is time. Time is potential. Potential is life. I have dealt with the most depressed, abused girls. I have sat in psych wards where girls would say, there is no reason for me to live. There is nothing that I can do in this world. I remember such a case. It was a very fascinating case, actually. It was in the Cornell, and the girl felt she could not live because she was brought up that her job on this world is to have children. And because of the abuse she went through, she said she will never get married to a man, she will never have children, and therefore, there's no reason for her to be in this world. If she leaves the world, another girl will be born who will have children. And they could not get this out of her. And I sat with her and I told her, I said, imagine the two of us are walking down Avenue J in Brooklyn, Central Avenue. And there's a little 4-year-old kid who's walking with his mother, and he lets go of his mother's hand and runs into the street. And there's a bus bearing down on this kid. And I said to this girl, you're standing there, and I'm standing there. I'm going to hesitate, because can I make it? Can I not make it? And that hesitation is what's going to kill that child. So you don't even want to live. So you're going to run into that street, not worrying if the bus hits you, and you're going to save that child and save that mother for the rest of her life who would never forgive herself, and save that mother from her husband who would be blaming her, how could you let go, and her in-laws and the people and the community. Do you know what you just did? So do you have the potential of running into a street and pulling this kid out in front of the bus? Would you do that? And she looked me in the eye and she said, of course I would do that. I said, so, what do you mean? There's no human being in the world who doesn't have potential. In one of my classes in seminary, we spoke about a man who was 90 years old, was in a coma, and was brain dead. Why should we keep him alive? Not in the Jewish world, the halacha. Why should we keep him alive? He's brain dead. He lived 90 years. He has great-grandchildren. He built buildings. He gave charity. He's brain dead. Let him go. What's his potential? I asked my class, what is this man's potential? He's brain dead. Does he have potential? And the girl said, no. So why in Judaism do we have to let him live? If he has no potential, and potential is life. Because all the people in the family that are praying for him, that are visiting him, that are sitting there and doing the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim. It's not only the potential of the person in the bed, but it's the potential of what the person causes to others. So until your time is over, you have potential. And that's why it's the hardest thing to give to another human being. Because if life is time, and that's why the English word is called the present, for the greatest present of all is the moment that we're in. That is the most hardest thing to give to someone else, because that's my life. That's me. A lot of people have a problem getting married because I'm a single guy and I got my time and I don't want someone to share my time. And every time I do Shalom bias, the woman says the same thing. Every woman says the same thing. Whether they're having a struggle, they're 5 years married, they're 10 years married, they're 15 years married. Every woman that comes to my house, nobody comes to say, well, hi Rabbi Wallerstein, marriage is great. Just wanted to let you know. No, it hasn't happened yet in 30 years. So I always let the lady speak first. I'm like, so what's going on? You guys, like, you're very, you look good together. You're married 18 years. Like, what's going on? And every woman says the same thing. And don't go home and tell this to your husband, because they don't like me as it is. Wallerstein, my husband used to love me. He doesn't love me anymore. And every husband reacts the same way. You see? This is the problem. Now, I don't know why guys say this, but this is what we say. What does she want from me? I pay the mortgage. I pay all the bills. Our accounts are together. I don't understand. I just got her a new car. We don't get it. And every woman says, that's not what I want. Well, not every woman. That's not what I want. I don't want that. So what do you want? What do you want from me? What did I give you when we first got married that I'm not giving you anymore? And she looks him in the eye and she says, time. You don't spend time. Remember we used to go out? It was like a big fight till 4 o'clock in the morning. Who's going to hang up first? No, you hang up. No, I'm not hanging up until you hang up. Right? Remember that? You remember we couldn't get enough of each other? What happened? You play ball twice a week. You come home late from work. When you're home, you're not here. You go to learn. You go to daven. I just want to spend some time with you. That's what every woman wants. Why? Because that's the potential of a marriage. You can read all your marriage books. You guys don't spend time together. Burn them with the chametz. It's a waste of time. So I say, okay. First of all, we have a woman that's expressive. She communicates. She says what she wants. We're halfway there. So I look at the guy and I'm like, okay. So this is what we're going to do. There's a place called Las Cabos. I remember many, many years ago, I sort of investigated. I wanted to go with my wife because I heard in those days they didn't have cell phones, but even the regular phones they didn't have on this island. And each house, villa, had its own pool, so that was great. And then there's a big hotel on the bottom where the Sephardim go for midwinter, so they had a minyan and a shear. So this was my perfect thing. And you could actually ride a bicycle down and ride a bicycle up. It was like my dream. So I called them up. I'm not going to miss minyan. I'm going to have a shear, kosher, pool, private. Great. So he said, I just want to let you know, we have no televisions, no radios, no phones. There's one public phone in the lobby, and that's for emergencies. And you'll be embarrassed to stand there on the phone because this is a honeymoon place. You come with your girl, with your wife, and a book. That's it. It's like, wow. I said, listen, either you're going to go home very in love, or you're going to go home and get divorced. Because you're going to start spending time with each other, not with other things, then you're going to see if this is real. Why am I talking about marriage? It's not what they brought me here for. Because it's the exact same thing in any relationship that you have with anyone. This is the biggest problem with the relationship that we have with our kids. So I need to start with this before I talk about all the coaching and the hints. If you're not willing to give them time, if everyone in this room would say, like, Rabbi Wallerstein, we want to hear like coaching and discipline and unconditional love and conditional love, but we as parents, we're very, very busy. We don't have time for our kids. I would close my book and I'd walk out because there's nothing for me to tell you that's going to work. You will all fail. You don't give them time, you will fail. I am a Rebbe for 40 years. I see the kids who get time and I see the kids who don't get time. I'm a PTA. When I see one parent show up without the other parent, it's very different than when both parents show up. I have 5 girls. I don't have any boys. I never missed a PTA, and it's a little embarrassing to sit there with 400 women in waiting, and I'm like standing there with my wife with a couple of other guys that probably people think these guys don't have jobs. Like, what are they doing here? But do you know I'm a teacher? Do you know the difference when both parents show up to PTA? Or one parent shows up to PTA? When both parents show up to PTA, I know they're very serious about their kid, and I better be very careful with that kid. Because those parents are on top of it. When one parent shows up, maybe yes, maybe no. You're not willing to give the time to go hear from a teacher how your kid is doing? So that's the number one. If we start there, we have a good shot. But technology, the world of Apple, the world of the web, and if you look at the translation of a web, we understand what a web does. It captures the fly, and the fly tries to get out. And the more he tries to get out, the stickier it gets. Look at the words, at the subconscious, look at the words that he used. It's a net. You don't want to be a fish in a net. It's a web. On the keyboard it says enter, but it doesn't say exit. It says ESCP. Whoever wrote the keyboard understood that if you enter, you cannot get out. You have to escape. Look at the word for the phone itself. It's a cell. A cell, a web, a net, escape. I didn't write any of those words. How dare a parent who has the most precious thing in the world that God gave them. I spoke at a Shabbaton for Eitan. 250 couples that didn't have children for at least 13 years. You think if they had a kid, they'd be on their phone? They told me, don't talk about chinuch in this Shabbaton. Don't you dare. And don't freak out when you see there's no kids. Because every Shabbaton there's 100, 200, 300 kids running around. How dare we as parents? We're giving this present from God. A pikadon. Something to watch, something to nurture. They're not our children. They're his children. How do you know that? Because he can take them away. And if you can take something away, it's not yours. How dare we take a phone and be busy with it? When my kid's sitting at the kitchen table and he wants to talk to me, and I'm so busy with what? A piece of metal that has no feelings? WhatsApp? Do you understand the subconscious of your children? They know they don't mean anything if they come home and you come home and you're on your phone the whole time. I'm not talking Judaism. I'm not one of those rabbis. I'm not talking about the porn that's on it. I'm talking about the waste of time. This is not a Jewish thing. How dare we waste our time when we have this beautiful child who all he wants and all she wants is our time, like the woman. That's all she wants from her husband in a relationship. All you want is my daddy's time. One of the best songs, I want to talk about non-Jewish songs, but it's an unbelievable song that Harry Chapin wrote. The Cat's in the Cradle and the Silver Spoon. What an amazing song. When you're coming home, Dad, I don't know when. We'll get together then. And he never spent time with the kid, and at the end, he's a grandfather. And now he wants to see his grandchildren. And he calls up his son. And he says to his son, I want to come over, whatever it is. And his son said, I'm too busy with the kids. I'm too busy at business. And the end of the song, my son has grown up just like me. He's just become just like me. I didn't give him time. He's not giving me any time. And unless we change this, you want kids off the derech? You want to stop kids off the derech? We have to change. We have to give them our love. What is love? Our time. Kids should never go to sleep without a parent sitting there. And not telling them about the big bad wolf who's going to sleep with this guy blowing down houses. Or his grandmother has a long nose. Listen to the stories that we tell them. Or some kid walks into a house and says, that's hot, that's cold, that's medium. I don't like any of that. And then you're like, hey, how come you're spoiled? What do you mean? The story you tell me every night before I go to sleep. Bed's too soft, bed's too hard, I don't like that bed. Just walked into the house, didn't even knock. What a story. Shimshon Pincus said he was over 12 lavim before the story gets midway. We're very disconnected. So when kids don't get that love and that time, so they try to find it other places. But those places, ladies and gentlemen, are not their loving parents. Those are bad places. So I'll talk about myself for 2 minutes. I don't know how to be a parent. We don't go to school to be how to be a parent. You know how I know how to be a parent? I don't think I'm a good parent. My kids, I have to ask them. I don't know. My father and my mother were amazing parents. I learned everything from them. So if you don't parent your kid can't parent his kids. And if you don't give your kid time, he doesn't know any different. My father was always on his phone, so what's your problem that I'm on my phone? So on top of not having a relationship with your kids, you're ruining them as parents because we do what we see. I went through crazy abuse when I was a little boy in 3rd grade. But in those days, you just kept quiet about it, and you just carried it on your back. You're a soldier. And then again in 10th grade. And in 10th grade I said, I'm out. I don't want any part of this religion. I don't want part of this at all. And I wanted to leave Yiddishkeit. I had a major problem. And my major problem was my mother and father. Not that they said anything to me, they didn't even know. I said, I cannot hurt the people that love me so much. In Tehillim, David HaMelech says, Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha, serve God with happiness, love, and serve God with fear. So the rabbis ask, either or. Either I fear God or I love God. And one of the great rabbis answered, and he said, the greatest fear is to hurt the one you love. I could not hurt my parents. So I stuck. And things changed drastically after 12th grade. You think my father loved me more than any of you? There wasn't a moment in his life that he did not spend with me, my brother, and my sister. He told us, my whole life I dreamed about having children that I can spend time with. He had no friends. He didn't have time for friends. He went to Florida, his kids went to them. He went to a ball game, his kids went with them. I was a little boy, I got off the bus on a Friday, he traveled from New York to Florida and back. He was a salesman, I got off the bus, he was standing on the porch of my house with a football. He just came back from 5 days of traveling, and those days there was no food. It was a can of some split pea soup and sardines the man ate for the whole week. And when I got off that bus from yeshiva, Friday afternoon, who was standing on the porch? My father, every single week. He didn't have to say I love you, he did. He didn't have to. I knew this man loves me to the end of the earth, and not only that, he always told us, my 3 children are the greatest things that ever happened to me. When you walk around and you know your mother and father, and if you don't think I got schleck, I got schleck. I wasn't such a good kid. When I was supposed to get it, I got it. But you know, when we don't hit anymore, chas v'shalom, I'm not saying you should, but when I did get it, I knew that I was getting it from a man that loves me. So all the other time he loves me, and now I got a smack, must be I did something wrong. If I keep getting smacks, and the guy tells me he loves me, no. If my father smacked me, boy, did I have to push. Though I had to push to get hit. I didn't get hit that easy. I pushed. And if you can't do that for your kids, I'm a Rebbe. If your kid doesn't walk around with that, I call it a bulletproof vest. I don't care to this day what anybody thinks of me. People are like, you say some stuff. Like, hello, some rabbis don't like what you say, some other guys don't like what you say. On the internet they don't like what you say sometimes. I'm like, I don't care. I don't care what my mother and father think about what I said. And I know my father would have said it. It's a bulletproof vest. My mother and father, they think I'm the greatest thing. They love me. When I do something wrong, they tell me because that's part of love. If I see you're a baseball and you're swinging wrong, I'm going to correct your swing. Last night there was a big World Series game, and there's a guy on LA that hit crazy, and they were saying that he was the last pick guy, and they brought him into LA, and the coach saw how he was swinging, forgot the player, he's their best player now, and the coach saw how he was swinging, and he said, you're not gonna make it. He hit one home run in like 5 years. And the coach spent time with this guy and changed his swing. Same thing with a pitcher, changed his pitch. That means you love someone. Not when you're watching them strike out, and you're not telling them what they're doing wrong, because maybe he's not going to be happy. He'll be a lot more happy when the ball goes off the wall on the bottom of the 12th and they win. So as parents, the first thing, that's why I'm telling you this, the first thing before all the other stuff is you have to give them time. Get rid of that phone in the house. You need it for business? Great. Don't sell your kids. That's the new business. We're selling our children for a phone, an 8, a 7, a 6. If that's what you're going to do, we can get out, me, the doctor, we can give out papers, you can read books, and you can read Mishpacha and all that other stuff. You lost them. You lost them. They don't think they're the greatest thing in your eyes. You lost them. Because at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, whether we like it or not, and I'm sorry if I'm triggering anyone, and by the way, if your parents weren't like my father, okay, you could be them. You could be like that. This is not about your parents. We're not judging your parents. Everyone went through different things. You could be like that. And we talked about Zaydis and Bobbies in this room. Wow. Zaydis and Bobbies, I didn't have one. They all died in the Holocaust. You guys have grandfathers? So many kids have great-grandfathers, but grandfathers and grandmothers? That's an unbelievable resource. I hate when grandparents say, like, I brought up my kids. I'm retired. You know what my father told me? After I die, I'm going to keep giving you chinuch from my grave. I'll come to you in a dream if I have to. I'm not going away. Grandparents, you're the safety net. Grandchildren come to you and they can just be loved. And loved, not criticized, not disciplined. That's not your job. It's your kid's job. Not criticized, not disciplined, just love. I didn't have such a place. Most of us my age didn't have such a place to escape, to be hugged, candy, sit. Oh. And so many of us are like, no, I'm going to Florida. I don't have to take care of my grandchildren. No, they need you. You wouldn't be here if they don't need you. They need you. I can't tell you how many kids that I taught were saved by Bobby and Zaidi. Because Bobby and Zaidi don't have to discipline. And when they start making noise, you send them home. It works great. Once we're giving time, now we can talk. If we're not giving time, don't even pay attention to what I have to say. Look at your phone. Tonight when you come home, do me a favor. Sit by your kid's bed, take out your iPhone, and look at your phone, and look at that kid sleeping, that little angel, and make a decision. Which one you're going to give time. Make that decision tonight. And when you come home, mothers and fathers, and your kids are home, take it, put it in a basket, turn off the phones, show your kids that they mean more than that phone. I was assistant principal at Crown Heights Yeshiva, so I went downstairs to the little kids. I love to talk to little kids because they tell you everything. There is no filter. It's like, how's your father doing? Oh, he just threw a plate at my mother last night. I'm like, what did she throw back? The table. Good. So you have to be, it's not fair. You're not allowed to ask them those questions. Anyway, so I like to make kids happy. And there's a little girl walking in the hall. I'm downstairs with the kindergarten P1A. She's walking in the hall, and she didn't look very happy. I'm like, Ruchi! Yeah, Rabbi Wallerstein. I'm like, who loves you the most in the world? I'm going to get her psyched. Or did it backfire? I don't know. Ruchi, who does your mother love most in the world? Not me. I'm like, oh, you have a baby brother, because that's usually what happens. You have a baby brother? No, I don't have any babies. I'm like, who does your mother, this is a true story, who does your mother love the most in the world? Gitti. Who's Gitti? Your sister? No, it's her best friend. Not a relative, like her mother, aunt? No, it's her best friend. I'm like, how do you know? True story. I'm going back 5 years, not now. How do you know that your mother loved Gitti more than you, Ruchi? I'm in trouble now. Because that wasn't the way it was supposed to go. She's always talking to her, even when I come home. None of you in this room know the perception of a child. You have no idea what they're thinking when they see you on your phone. It's a true story. It backfired. I called up that mother immediately. I said, do you know that your daughter doesn't think you love her? What are you talking? I'm like, who's Gitti? She said, Gitti? Yeah, who's Gitti? She said, Gitti? I'm like, yeah, that's your best friend. You're on the phone with her all the time. So she knew that the kid spoke to me. Sit and look at your child and make a decision. Of course, I'm not telling you not to throw your phone in the garbage. You need it for this and that. But wow, this is dead. This battery dies and you have to keep recharging it. You know the kid, it's not the first time you heard the kid tell his father, for my birthday, I want to be your cell phone. He says, you want a cell phone? No, I want to be your cell phone. What do you mean you want to be my cell phone? I want to be the first thing you look at when you wake up. I want to be the last thing you look at when you go to sleep. I want you to keep me next to your bed. I want you to charge me. I want you to upgrade me all the time. I have no idea, ladies and gentlemen, what's going on out there. But if you do give your child the time, there are certain things that we need to understand. Number one, something that works amazing. It's called positive criticism. It's unbelievable. It sounds like an oxymoron. What's positive criticism? When you compliment someone, so at the same time that you're complimenting them, you're sort of putting them to task to live up to what you're complimenting them. If the number 4 batter, who's the cleanup batter in baseball, keeps striking out, the coach could tell him, if you keep doing this, we're going to let you go, we're going to fire you, we're going to put you down to number 9. We're paying you crazy money, what do you think you're doing? That's criticism. Positive criticism is, do you know why we brought you to this team? You batted for 4 years, 350. You were amazing. They say you have the most natural swing ever to come in baseball. They say that one day you're going to hit more home runs than Babe Ruth. It's okay. You're in a slump. We're good with you, man. You're not going nowhere. If you strike out the rest of the year, we believe in you. Positive? Crazy criticism. He keeps striking. He struck out 100 times. So he's going to go home to the mirror and say, wow, that's what my team thinks of me? That I'm amazing? I'm going to go to batting practice every single day now for 4 hours. Why? Because if that's what you think of me, I want to live up to it. Of course, if the guy can't swing, you don't do that because then you're setting him up for failure. So your child, you have to figure out what you can compliment. You're the funniest kid. You know that you make the best jokes. Mommy and Tati, you are so funny. So he's going to start reading jokes on the Snapple bottles to make you happy. You're smart, you're fast, you're sports, you're dance, you're musical. You have to find the thing and tell them, you know, you're the best drummer. You're unbelievable. We're going to buy you a drum set. And what happens is, when you start doing well, then you start doing well, and you start doing well, and you start doing well at everything. Because when you get that feeling the first time that you're successful, it breeds success. When you keep failing and failing and failing and failing, it breeds failure. So when a kid comes home with a 50 on a test, chas v'shalom, people are shaking in the room, chas v'shalom, a 50 on a test. Instead of saying, oh, 50? Do you know your father works 3 jobs to pay for your tutors and you got a 50? He's going to have a heart attack. You're going to kill him. And your sister, she's in Shidduchim? And when people start talking that you're not intelligent, they're going to think the whole family's not intelligent. She's going to end up being an old maid. She's never going to get married. And Yosef, your friend, his mother's going to call me tonight. She's going to ask me, so how did your kid do? My kid got a 90? You're shaming the whole family. I'm sure many of us in this room heard this from their own parents. And then they called me up, Rabbi Wallerstein, what therapist should I send my kid to? I don't know why, he's so anxious. He has anxiety. The kid's walking around like, I just killed my father. My sister's never going to get married. My mother will never pick up the phone again. And I'm stupid. You killed them, man. You killed them. You just killed your kid. You think the next test is going to be better? It's going to be worse. Let's try this. A 50? Let me see the test. 20 questions, you got 10 right. Number 3 that you got right. Number 3 that you got right. That's much harder than number 2. How'd you get that right? And the mother sits there and he looks at it and he goes, you know what? You're right. Yeah, I wasn't thinking by number 1. The next time he gets a test, it's a 60. The next time he gets a test, it's a 70. Then he starts to feel good about himself. And when you believe you can do something, you can do it. And he believes that he can do it, and he can do it. Positive. He got a 50, don't kill him. He got half of it right. Go on the positive. Of course, if he needs a tutor, get him a tutor. I'm not telling you that. But you as the parent, he has to think, and she has to think that they are the greatest thing that ever happened. So I got my signal to finish. I'm going to finish with one more story. We'll end with this. First of all, I just want to tell fathers that are in the room. So in the Jewish world, we're dealing a lot with young, I don't want to say 7th, 8th graders. It's not more what's going on. 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th graders. Girls that are very busy with boys that we don't want them to be busy with boys. And parents come to me all the time. I found her phone. I found this. I found that. And she's talking to boys and she's doing other things with boys. And what's going on? I want to talk to fathers in this room for a minute. When God created the man and the woman, so in psychology, I don't know, I heard this actually in Utah, so I don't know if it's in the psychology books. It's called the plus. There's a vertical relationship and there's a horizontal relationship. The vertical relationship is when the kid's very small, father, mother, teacher, God. The horizontal relationship is when you begin to get older, friends, husband, right? It's plus. Vertical, horizontal. You have a vertical and a horizontal relationship. And the way he, because women are maternal, right? And therefore, he wants them in the end, right, in the horizontal, to be in love with the man, and a man should love her, and there should be that relationship. But so that has to be part of her, and has to be part of him. But what do you do when the kid's young? She can't have a relationship with a boy. So fathers give unconditional love to their daughters. Any guy that's in this room, you know that's true. And mothers give unconditional love to their sons. And many times it's a Shalom bias problem. Because the mother's yelling at her daughter, and the father's like, stop yelling at her. You were just like her when you were young. And the mother's like, you married me or you married her? And it becomes a big machlokes. And the other way around, the father's like trying to get him up for shachris, and his mother's like, you didn't used to get up for shachris. He's like, what are you butting into my business for? And they have this whole big fight. But meanwhile, the mother is brought into this world with unconditional love for a male. As a female, she has unconditional love. So that unconditional love has to be a father. Chatz v'shalom, not wrong, not physically, but he has to be there for his daughter. And you know what happens when a father is there for his daughter and he takes her to a baseball game and to a hockey game and out to eat and gets interested in her life? He becomes sort of her boyfriend. He's the go-to man in her world. So when someone's bothering her, she goes to her father. And she has this relationship. And 99.9% of the girls that I have met that are 14 years old, and I love when they come into my office and they're 14 years old, and I'm like, don't tell me. I know the guy you're going out with. What do you mean? What do you mean nobody knows? I'm like, he's 17, and he doesn't get along with his mother. What are you, I'm a couple? How do you know that? Oh my God, what else do you see on my forehead? I'm like, I don't see anything. You're looking for a father. And he's looking for a mother. So you're looking for a father, you're looking for an older guy, he's shaving, he's that, oh, I'm with an older guy. And the guy, why is he 17 and with a 13, 14-year-old girl? Because he's going to get unconditional love from her. She's going to be like, you're my God. If he's going out with a 17-year-old girl, she'll be like, why are you late? Why, yeah, she's giving him a hard time. So as fathers, if we want to protect our daughters, develop a relationship. It doesn't say anywhere in the Torah that you shouldn't. She should be just like your son. And if you develop that relationship and it's healthy, she's not going to look for love in all the wrong places. And as mothers, talk to your kids. Take your son out for lunch. He needs some female love. And if he doesn't get healthy female love from his mother, he's going to get unhealthy female love from someone else. It's all based in time. You got to give your kids time. And don't take the whole family. Every single one of your kids needs to be taken out separately. Because when you go on a family trip, and I've had this all the time, what do you mean? I spend time with my family, I take them all out. To them, it's a family trip. You don't care about me. You took all the brothers, all my sisters. You need to take your kids one-on-one. And show them that you love them. And spend time with them. And listen to them. And talk to them. And make a decision tonight what's more important in your life. Because after we leave this world, after we die, we still walk the world as a husband and a wife more than we're alive. Because when we're a husband and a wife and we're alive, we're two entities. When our child walks through the world, we become one entity through them. So even after we leave this world, our child is both of us together. You're going to give that up for a phone? Or a screen? Or a piece of metal? So my bracha to everyone here is, God should give you a lot of time, which is a lot of love, which is a lot of potential. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's humbling to be here in your community. And what I'm going to try to do is oh, you want to fix that? Great. What I'm going to try to do is share with you some of the stories from the front line of dealing with people that struggle with mental health and addiction issues and children. That's what I do. I treat children, young adults and adolescent children who struggle with these things. I run a wilderness program out in Utah and in Oregon. So my work is working with people who are now struggling, and then to bring it back to the community where it might be preventative or it might help people that aren't as severe. And so there's some wisdom that I want to share with you from those stories. But I want to start off with this story. It was about 2 years ago this month that I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. I was actually visiting New York City like I do about once a month, and got a call from my doctor that something in the x-rays was off. And then when I got back home that I would have to take a look at it. So my wife and I went to the University of Utah, and we met with the neurologist, and he knew what it was. Already I had no idea. I thought it could be anything from a tumor, any kind of lesion. And he said it very matter-of-factly. He said, well, you know you have MS. And I said, we didn't know that. And it was a bit overwhelming, of course. It was a scary moment for me. My wife and I had driven to the hospital separately because we'd been doing different things during the day. And when I left the hospital, I called one person, and it wasn't my best friend, and it wasn't another member of my family. It was an acquaintance that I had, somebody that I had a relationship with, but it wasn't one of my closest friends. It was somebody whose father and brother also were diagnosed and had been living with MS for a long time. I didn't know why I called him. I think I called him because I imagined that he would know what to say, that he would understand. And he's not even 30 years old. And I called him and I told him what I had. And without a hesitation, he just said, I want you to know I love you and you're not alone. And that's what I needed to hear. And I didn't know I needed to hear that before he said it. So I want to start with this idea with you today is you're not alone. If you're struggling with your own issues, if you're struggling with parenting, you are not alone. Hopefully, in the message of my book, you'll get that feeling that I'm with you. I'm not standing up here telling you that I've got it all perfect and got it all figured out, but I know what the struggle feels like, and I can share mine with you, and I can share the struggles of the thousands of parents that I've worked with. I want to start with telling you the story of a parent. With somebody, I was sitting on the mountaintop in the dirt, finishing our program with a mother, father, and son. The son had been sent to us because he had anger issues and substance abuse issues. And throughout the process, the mother was, sharing her parallel process. She was doing her own work during this time, really delving into her own work. And she sat on this hillside as we were concluding the program, saying our goodbyes. And she said, her son was a football player. And she said, I just went to senior day. at school. Senior day at their school is where all the seniors of the football team gather in midfield, and they call their mothers down from the stands, and they give them a rose, and then they give them a blanket that has the letter of the high school on it with their number, and they give that to their mother in appreciation for all the sacrifices that the mother had made. And of course, her son wasn't there for that game. He played football. He was a major part of the team, but because of his problems, he couldn't be there. He was with us. So I was anticipating, as this story concluded, to offer the mother some comfort, to tell her, yeah, that there's a loss in all of this for sure, and I'm sorry for your loss, I'm sorry for his loss. But seamlessly, she said to me, and as I watched all of those other mothers, and I know them well, and I know their sons, I felt sorry for them, that they weren't getting to have the experience that I was having with my son. And it hit me how lucky the parents are that I get to work with, that they are required because of the circumstances to ask themselves difficult questions. Most people won't show up to a parenting class, to a class on mental health or addiction or a marital class unless they're struggling. Some will. I suspect that there's some of those that are here tonight. But because of her experience, she was transformed. And that's really what my work is about. It's about the transformation of parents. I talk about in my book that parent education doesn't change children. It changes parents. And that change can have an incredible effect on the child. My mother-in-law is a retired high school teacher, middle school teacher actually. And after reading my book a couple of years ago, she said, you know, I think it would be fascinating for you to go into schools and to teach teachers about the challenges that are facing their children today. And I said, if I did that, if I was invited to do that, I wouldn't teach them about the children, I would teach them how to listen. Because if they can learn how to listen, the children will tell them all that they need to know. And there's no generic description of challenges that children are facing anyway. And so really this capacity that I talk about in the book, that I talk about with my work, this is about a capacity to hold a child in your mind with love and kindness. To hold a child without judgment. And I want to talk about tonight about a few things, practical things, that will make an impact on them. It's not a simple cause and effect, right? Because I know that, because I deal with a lot of mothers and fathers who, in their descriptions, and even in the child's description, do everything right. And still some things go wrong. There are still circumstances. But I want to talk about some things that can have an amazingly powerful impact on children. One of the most common things, like Ellie talked about, was I get the question, how can you change my child? You know, the complaint obviously in my program is something's going wrong. So how can you change the child? And so I wrote this parenting book, and I realized I had to write a chapter on behaviorism. I had to write a chapter on changing behavior, because if I didn't, it would be missing. People would be wondering how you do it. And I want to read to you the preface of the chapter, because it speaks to this idea of capacity, this idea of listening. It says, and behavioral tools are pretty simple, by the way. Behavioral theory is pretty simple. It's pretty standard, and study after study could show the same effects on behavioral theory. But this is the idea leading into the chapter. Using behavioral tools is fine, but only if they are nested in love and awareness. And we would be wise to first listen to what the behavior is telling us before we try to change it. There's great wisdom. I was listening to a colleague talk about angry adolescents. There's great wisdom in that anger. And if our goal first and foremost is to try to get them to not be angry, for example, we're not listening. We don't have capacity. We just have an agenda that fits what we need. The rabbi was talking about time, and I want to talk about, and love, and I want to talk about love also. I've had this idea about love because I've watched people that love people abuse them. Right? I've seen parents abuse children in all kinds of horrific ways. I've seen spouses abuse each other. And still there's this feeling that they describe that they have love for them. Right? I worked with domestically violent men who beat their wives. And they describe, but I love her. If love is just a feeling, if it's just that feeling of affection, it's valueless. if you can still do those other things that I just described. But if love is about capacity, if it's about capacity to be larger than, to be big enough for your child, then it can make a difference. In my book, I talk about this idea that it's not what you say to your children, that does have an impact, but it's deeper than that. It's not what you say to your children that becomes their internal voice. It's what you think about them. I know that's kind of a high bar, but they can sense it. Right? They can sense if they get thought of all the time as a problem. And speaking to this capacity, one of the things that shrinks our capacity is anxiety, fear. That doesn't, again, I'm with you on that. I have it too. It should inform us. But it's something that we need to take care of. Because if I give my child my anxiety, if I give them my fear, they become responsible for taking care of me. And that's not the way it should go. It's my job, it's your job to take care of them, to be there for them. And then what happens to them, this really ironic thing happens to them, is if we wire our children, right? If we wire them to be responsible for our disappointment, our feeling proud, our feeling anxious, right? If those are their responsibilities, then they go out in the world being incredibly susceptible to peer pressure. Because they can't distinguish later on in life the difference between being responsible for mom and dad's feelings and being responsible for their boyfriend's feelings, for their partner's feelings. They lose themselves in that process. So our job as parents is to develop capacity. So we do things for ourselves that are important and healthy. We go to therapy. We go to meetings. We go to classes. We do things, we exercise. We do things that take care of us so that we have the capacity to come back for the child. I was recently running a workshop where there was a piece of work where the husband was talking. We were doing a role play, and he was talking about and to his wife, who was being played by one of the other participants in this therapeutic role play. And he paused mid-exercise, and he said to me, "I think I need my wife. Is that bad? Is needing my wife bad?" And I said to him, it's not bad, it's just not love. It's okay, we all need people. Everybody needs people, and it's okay to need somebody. But don't confuse that with love, because love is a giving thing, and needing is a taking thing. And so, principally, with our children, this is a loving thing that we do, not a needing thing that we do. In her amazing book, I think one of the most important books on child development in the last 50 years, Alice Miller talks, the name of the book is called The Drama of the Gifted Child. The Drama of the Gifted Child. The giftedness of the child that she describes is not some kind of incredible intellectual mind. It's the ability of a child to read what a parent needs, to give that to them at the cost of the real self of the child. And then what ends up happening is symptoms develop, because the child still needs things. And if the child is going to sacrifice parts of themselves to make the parents happy, then the child's going to act it out. They're going to act out sideways. I talk about this all the time, this idea. You know, there's this saying that you're only as happy as your least happy child. You know that saying? I'm proposing tonight it's insane and irresponsible. I have 4 children. One of them is here tonight. I have 4 children. I didn't know that I could love a human being as much as I love my children. So I know what that feels like. But at the same time, it's my serenity. This is what they talk about in Al-Anon and in Codependence Anonymous. My serenity, my peace of mind, my well-being is my responsibility. I sat with another family at a graduation. The mother and father, by many people's definition of the word, would be considered successful. You know, socially, professionally, very, very accomplished. The daughter was graduating from our program, and the daughter was sent to us because of some mild issues, some anxiety issues. She had some problems with relationship with her body and with food, and that was coming out. She was not motivated in some of her classes. So she was with us for the summertime. And at this graduation session that we were having, the mother described it. I could tell the mother looked worn down. You know, circles under her eyes. You can tell she hadn't been sleeping well. And she described this to her daughter, saying, I'm so worried about you. I'm not sleeping very well. I'm not eating very well. I can't concentrate with the other activities in my life. And I'm miserable because you're not reading your summer reading. You're still struggling with your weight. in some of the other issues she described that the daughter hadn't fully fixed yet. And the daughter said something, I remember it as clear as if it was happening right now. She said something very plain to the mother. She said, "What do you know about happiness?" And the mother had nothing to say. Because the mother wasn't happy. Because happiness was dependent upon how the girl was doing. That's not love and parenting, right? That's our job. And what I say to the clients that I work with, to the parents that I work with, if your children are struggling, you need more help and support because your children require more capacity. Some of my children require more capacity than others. My son, who was here tonight during his teenage years, required more capacity than other children. And at different phases, my children require different things of me. But that's my responsibility, not his, to take care of me. The idea that I want to talk about and kind of focus on tonight is, the idea is seeing them. Really seeing them and hearing them. A lot of adult clients will tell me, and I work with all ages, adult clients will tell me that one of the things growing up for them was that they weren't allowed to feel. And I'm pretty confident that there was never on the refrigerator in the house that they grew up on the rule, and one of them was don't feel. You know, don't feel angry or don't feel sad or don't feel pain. Pretty sure that wasn't the case. But it was their experience that they were not allowed to feel. And so then they don't know how to allow that for their children. They don't know how to deal with it. But the point is that because it's so uncomfortable for us when our children are suffering, struggling, we do things that we think are harmless, like we try to talk them out of it, tell them to look on the bright side, give them a pep talk. And we think in our minds we're being helpful, right? That seems like a kind of a positive thing to do. But they need to be heard. They need to be understood. I was writing my book, finishing it up, finishing the editing, which was the hardest part by far. And I was on a trip with my wife and my youngest child at the time. Still is my youngest child. We had this kind of routine where I would work during the day and they would go out and play. It was in Los Angeles, and they would go to an amusement park and play, and then at night we would all go to dinner and have fun. So in the morning and in the evening I would see them, but in the day I would be working. So I'm editing my book, so I'm particularly sharp because I'm learning the things that I wrote that I need to remember. And at the time, I think she was probably 6, she said to me, we were kind of snuggling in bed before they were going out for the day, and she said to me, my daughter said, "I wish all of my siblings were dead." And because I'd been editing the book, I'm like, okay, I know how to respond to this one. And I know what thought came into my mind, you know, what the typical response would be for me and for most people. And I said, wouldn't it be great if you were the only child? We could spend all this time with you. There would be no competing for time. We could take trips. Every time we took a trip with a family, it would just be you, and you would get all this attention. And she just paused and relaxed a little bit and said, you know what though, my siblings are my best friends. And I would miss them. See, I didn't have to tell her that. What I had to do in that moment is I just had to hear her and understand her. There's a great line out of a new book by Dr. Harriet Lerner. She's a great self-help author. She wrote a great book on boundaries, my favorite book on boundaries, called The Dance of Anger. In her newest book on forgiveness and apologies, she said, when I get anxious, I get instructive. And that makes a lot of sense to me. When we get anxious, we try to teach and correct. And I have so many parents that get worried about when I talk about this idea of containing. That's what they call it in psychotherapy. Of containing somebody, of hearing somebody, of seeing somebody, of deeply listening and understanding somebody. They worry about this aspect because they say, isn't part of our job to instruct, to guide? And my response is, of course it is. And this is in part how you do it. This is the foundation of doing it, is you hear first. And in our program, you know, the most amazing things, all of these kids that are acting out, doing all kinds of dangerous and horrific things, they have memorized every lecture of their parents. And the reason that I know that is because they give it to everybody else. 3 weeks into the program, they're an expert on life, and they have all the advice in the world for the new student, the new client. They're not missing data. They're missing an experience of being seen and being heard. That's what, and that contribution, if you want, in my experience, and there's evidence to support it in the research and attachment theory, in my experience, the greatest contribution you can make to a child, it has to do, of course, with time, is to hear and see them. That's what creates resilience. Because when somebody is heard and seen, then they know themselves. Then when they're hungry, they eat. Then when they're tired, they sleep. Then when they don't want to go do something, they don't do it because they've been seen. And then they've experienced themselves as okay. Jessica Benjamin, a great attachment theorist, said that the only way to find oneself is to be found by somebody else. My research, my doctoral dissertation, was about studying children. We were studying them in young adulthood, but we were studying them that had gone through various traumas in their life. And we gave them over 1,200 questions, various measures. And we were looking for, was there anything that we saw most powerful at mitigating the trauma? What was the most powerful? And the trauma wasn't severe abuse. The trauma was, in this case, divorce, which is a trauma. And one parent, at least one parent, had an alcohol abuse issue, right? It didn't even have to be a crazy, angry alcoholic, just that issue in the family. So we studied these two traumas, and we thought, was there anything that mitigated? And there was one question on all of it that made the biggest difference. If they identified that somebody during their childhood who was consistent got them and saw them. Here's the problem with that. It's academically fairly an easy idea to think about, but I will tell you what gets in the way of it. Anxiety and fear. Anger and frustration. In a sense, the minute that you become anxious or angry or upset, you've lost contact with the other person. You ever seen any video like this, any example like this where they show somebody going throughout their day, somebody cuts in front of them in traffic, and then somebody spills coffee, and they have all these negative thoughts. And then they show the same day, but they show the thought bubbles of all the people that are cutting them off and spilling coffee on them and giving their order late. And of course, all these people are going through their own lives. I just had to tell my spouse that I got fired from my job. I just found out that my mother has terminal cancer. My son, who has a learning disability, has to be moved to a different school. And all of a sudden, what happens? You have compassion. And so that's what comes out of it. Of being able to see, that's what it feels like, is you have compassion. You understand. You still have your boundaries, but you understand. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow said, if we could read the secret history of our enemies, we would find in each story suffering sufficient to disarm all hostility. If we could see people, if we had that capacity, and that means that we have to take care of all these feelings that are uncomfortable, that cause disconnection, by going to our meetings, going to Al-Anon, going to therapy, whatever it is, doing our yoga, our exercise, whatever it is. We have to feed ourselves in that way, spiritually and emotionally. Then we can provide this fantastic container, which makes all the difference in the world and contributes to resiliency. My therapist told it this way. I love this story. It's kind of a poetic example. She was talking about her therapist, actually. So I think that would be my grand therapist. So my grand therapist was seeing this client over years that had grown up in rural Germany. And she would, she kind of had a free association type of therapy where the client would tell stories. And sometimes it was hard to distinguish if the story was today, here and now, or if the story was historic. And during one session, the woman was telling a story. And the therapist said, I knew that she was talking about her childhood because I could smell the river near the farm where she grew up. And I thought that was such a profound example of being seen. I asked my therapist, I said, is there anything that would cause you to disconnect from me, that you'd be so anxious in our session that you would lose connection? She said, if you came here telling me you killed your wife, I'd probably be concerned and unable to contain you. And I said, I'm glad there's a limit to this. But she did tell me one time, but if you were in love with a chicken, I would assume that you would have a good reason. I'd want to understand why. And I said, my mother would not have reacted that way for sure. So let's talk about this reaction that we have to our children. I want to give you the most simple illustration of it. If I come to you with an issue, a confession of something that I did or something that I'm struggling with, and your response is, I immediately know you're not the person I'm going to talk to. I need to talk to somebody who's going to be able to be with it. And if I have to start taking care of your anxiety in this process, that's not going to work for me, because I'm coming to this exchange with a need, right? So as simple as that, but that makes sense, right? If you come to somebody and your story, your question, your dilemma causes them to be upset, to be afraid, to be angry, you know that's not the person that you're going to be able to talk to and get something from. You're going to be inclined, first of all, they're not going to be able to be there for you because they're struggling. Second of all, you're going to be inclined, you're going to feel the pull that you need to take care of them. So then our job becomes, what I say to families is, you want to be the first phone call, right? You want to be the first phone call your child makes in a crisis. That's kind of the ideal. And to be the first phone call, you've got to do this work that I'm talking about. This heroic work of looking at yourself. Most answers, when I do parenting education, most answers I could simply boil down to this, is do your own work. Look at yourself. That feels vulnerable and scary and counterintuitive, because my kid's the one with the problem. I don't have the problem. But I'll tell you, it makes a fantastic difference when a parent makes their life their project. I'll tell you this. If your child needs to be perfect, they're doomed. They don't need perfection. What they need is they need you to make your life your project. And let me give you a couple of examples where that can make a difference. I had a young adult man. He had graduated from our program. He was in a sober living environment in Southern California. And I'd been working with his parents after the program for a while. And the sister called me. She's a young adult herself, very successful. She was the one in the family that did everything right. And she said, that's why she's calling me. I'm going to go visit my brother in Orange County next week. And so my parents said that I could call you and ask you what to do and what not to do, because I don't want to mess it up. I don't want to set him back, and I haven't been participating in all of this work like my parents. So please give me some guidance about what I might say, what I should say, and what I shouldn't say to my brother. And what I said is, why don't you just tell him that? Just show up and tell him that you're afraid you're going to make a mistake. Because a few things would happen with that. Number one, it'd be nice for him to know that he was not the only screw-up in the family. He was not the only one in the family that didn't know things, or got things wrong, or was afraid. So that would be nice for him. It'd be nice to know that you weren't perfect, because that's kind of your role in the family. And I tried to explain this to her, and it didn't sink in, and she didn't do it. She couldn't do it, because she couldn't imagine showing up in that way and how scary that would be. So that's part of the heroic nature of this. I had another mother, different family. I was hired to be the therapist so that the kid wouldn't have to come to my program. That was my job. This was a couple of years ago. He's already graduated from my program, and he's doing very well. But that was my job initially, was to come to the family and to do preventative work. He was bought in somewhat. He was motivated somewhat to do it. So I was going to help them steer clear of this program that I was running. And at one point, critical to the end of his time at home, before his parents finally said, we can't give you what you need at home, you need to go somewhere where you can get it. He said, and they were Mormon, this is Utah, so they're Mormon, and he said to his parents, he said, you know what, yes, I lie about things, but you made me a liar. When I was a little kid, if my friends didn't look right, I just decided that I would lie. If they weren't Mormon, I would lie about them being Mormon. And if they had long hair or didn't look like you think they should look, I wouldn't tell you that they were my friends. I would tell you I was going over to someone else's house, and so you made me a liar. And he said this in anger. This was not an overtly angry kid. Not common for him. This took a lot of courage for him. And of course, like the story with my daughter, I had the lecture queued up. Right? Well, they did, I wanted to say, but they didn't make you a liar. It's still your choice to lie. Right? We have that lecture. It's still your responsibility. Let's talk about feelings. I could have done that. But the mother did something amazing. She just said, you're right. I did all those things, and I'm sorry. And again, the boy relaxed, seemed soothed by it, and the session ended shortly thereafter. And after the young man left, 17-year-old boy left, mother and father then turned to me and said, okay, Brad, we get the containing, the healing, that comes from it, the listening part. the understanding, the empathy, the compassion. We get that. But when do we teach him about the lying thing? Like, where does that come in? And I said, you just did. That's how you do it. You talk about your faults and flaws. Instead of giving your kid a lecture about peer pressure, talk about the peer pressure you still struggle with. It's most likely not as crippling as it is for your teenager or young adult or younger child, but it's there. None of us, I think, are immune from worrying about what somebody else thinks about us in a given circumstance. I know this because I work with people who struggle with talking about the stigma of mental health and addiction problems all the time. So one of the ways, imagine symptoms being a defense, right? If symptoms are a defense, and they are, right? They're a way of our wounds, our feelings speaking for us, right? They protect us from a more painful kind of hurt. Carl Jung says that it's a substitute for legitimate suffering, right? So that's what our symptoms are. And if our symptoms are this wall and this barrier, and I, as your father, your therapist, your other, if I come up with a pickaxe and start attacking your wall that you've built to protect yourself, what are you going to do? And everybody here knows that answer. You're going to reinforce the wall or run away. Right? That's why the wall is there, is to protect me from that. So even if it comes from a good place, if I come at it with a crowbar or a pickaxe and start knocking down your wall, you're going to reinforce it. So what do you do to lower the wall? You talk about your vulnerabilities. You talk about your mistakes. You talk about your struggles. When you give your kid when you give your kid a story about peer pressure that you still struggle with, don't be surprised if he or she gives you a little pep talk back. Like, you shouldn't really worry about what other people think about you. It's instinctual. We've trained them to become instructive in those moments. So, this is how you do it. You create this space. And there are moments to teach. There are moments to instruct. But they're less than you think. When I get a client, and I had a father say to me one time, he said, I just want to get to the point where my son will listen to me. And I said, okay, that'll come someday. But I think this first piece of work is going to be you listening to him. This father said to me, he said, I'm a fantastic listener. And I'm thinking, nobody is, so that's impossible. But he describes how he has to do it at work, and he's very successful professionally, and he listens very well. And so, as he's telling me this story, I just listen, and I say, okay. Watch these. I do these webinars and these podcasts. I said, watch these and we'll talk. 4 weeks into it, the dad says to me, I'm a horrible listener. I realize how poorly I've been listening to my son all of these years. I've just been listening to respond, listening to lecture, listening to tell him the way that it wasn't right. And by the way, that doesn't take much capacity. That's easy to do. It's not very hard. So, I said to him, you're a much better listener 4 weeks in than you were when you thought you were a good one. One of the things that I teach is we just don't know how bad we are at it. We just don't do it well. And we have so many things to tell others, to tell them, to tell our children. And that's why, folks, every family therapist that I know of, that I've ever heard of, every program that I've ever been associated with, a core tenet, a core activity is getting the parents to listen to the children. One of the things that I'm most thankful for is that my mother took me to therapy as a teenager. And the therapist said, you seem mad, Brad, so tell your mother about that. And I told her. And that was kind of impressive. But the most impressive thing, she brought me back after that. Again and again and again. And my mother over time learned that she didn't need to be loved. That's not parenting. She didn't need for me to be grateful for her. She didn't need that stuff from me. She turned a corner and just said, I'm just going to love him. So if we get invested in the things that we need from our children, we don't have the capacity to give back to them. It's not their job to take care of us. It's our job to take care of them in the process. And those instructive moments will be there, but it has to be on this foundation of healthy containment, healthy attachment. I'll say one more thing about attachment. I talk about, there's a phrase in self-help literature, in 12-step work, that's very common, the term healthy detachment, right? Most of the parents that I work with, they're not aloof, uninvolved, they're hovering. Snowplow parents, helicopter parents, over-involved parents. That's the parents that I mostly work with. When I tell people what I do in social circumstances, which I just don't do anymore, because you either get one of two things: you get a lecture on psychology, or you get a session that you're giving to them. So I just make it up when I'm on an airplane or something. But if I tell somebody casually what I do for a living, and the kind of, that we work with these kids, they say, "Oh, you work with those parents who just want to get rid of their kids." And I say, not even close. I work with parents who are absolutely struggling, who feel like a part of them is being ripped apart when their child comes to the program. So I realized this thing. Somebody asked me one day, because I was talking about healthy detachment, about this ability to take a step back and detach with love. And somebody asked me on one of my broadcasts, they said, "But when are you going to talk about attachment, Brad? You always talk about this healthy detachment thing, and you never talk about attachment." And I thought about that. Luckily, we were up against the end of the hour, so I said, we'll talk about this next week, and then I had a few days to think about it. And I started thinking about it after I ended the broadcast, and I started thinking, so what is healthy detachment? What's the opposite of healthy detachment? And what I realized was healthy detachment and attachment are the same thing. That if one, just think about this, if one is over-identified with one's child, then the child is lost in that equation. The child doesn't exist to some extent. So over-identification is the most significant, severe form of abandonment. And that's what we know. And again, this is not simple theory. This is provable science. When parents express over-involved language, the frontal lobe, the little bit that they have in the first place, that part that reasons, starts under-functioning. Their heart rate goes up, their blood pressure goes up. And I'm talking about phrases like, "I love you, I would do anything for you, I live for you." When children hear that, they stop reasoning. They get overwhelmed by the process. So this is what I'm talking about, is a kind of attachment. I'll tell this story as I begin to wrap up here, because my son is here, and I don't even know if he's ever heard it. But my son, I'm not a Mormon, but my son is a Mormon, and he went on a Mormon mission actually to New York City, here. And I don't know if you guys know what that is, but it's 2 years. You get to talk to him for 1 hour on Mother's Day and 1 hour on Christmas. That's the time you get to talk to your child. So my firstborn son, my little buddy, is going away for 2 years. He'd already spent a year at college, and so I knew a little bit about that, but I could call him anytime. I visited him several times, and now he's going to go away for 2 years with very little contact. So I'm sitting in my therapist's office on a Friday afternoon, and he's going into the training center on Tuesday, and this is the last time I'm going to see him for these 2 years. And I start to well up with tears and just say, I'm going to miss my son. And I said, I just don't know if I can describe, if I can tell him how much I love him, if I can communicate that. And my therapist said something perfect. She said, he knows exactly how much you love him. And I thought, she's right. There's nothing I can say that's going to change exactly his experience of me. He knows how much I love him, and he knows where I fall short. And so the tears slowed for a second when she said that, and then it was the next thing she said after a pause, and she said, and he needs to get as far away from you as he can. And then I was free. And then I was relieved. And then I knew it was a gift. And then I knew he needed to follow his dream. He needed to follow this thing for him. And I, as his father, was going to have the capacity to support and to love that. And sometimes it doesn't feel like love. It feels like loss. And it feels like tearing apart. And it feels pain. Most of the stuff that I talk about is counterintuitive. Most of the stuff isn't natural, isn't common sense. because in many ways we've had these ideas passed down. There's a great book called the Eden Project, The Search for the Magical Other. It's about marriage, by James Hollis. And he has a quote in there it's my favorite quote. He says, "A coward is incapable of exhibiting love. It is only the prerogative of the brave. Projection, fusion, going home is easy. Loving another's otherness is heroic. If we love other as other, we have heroically taken on the responsibility for our own individuation and our own journey. And this heroism may properly be called love." So the call tonight is about your work. The invitation is to go on your journey. Right? I borrow a lot of principles. The title of my book is actually borrowed from Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell was a philosopher who studied epic stories and myths of all generations and all cultures. And he came up with this idea that he called the hero's journey, that there's this common algorithm in the stories. Star Wars was based on this. George Lucas read Campbell's book. He was working on Star Wars for 2 years. He couldn't finish it. He read Campbell's book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, and finished it in 2 weeks. So Star Wars is that journey. And in this story, the hero or the heroine goes out to look for something, goes out on a quest to find something. In the case of parents, you go on this quest to save your children. And oftentimes, and you'll recognize this from our stories, from our movies, the best movies, the hero doesn't get what they were looking for, not exactly. But what happens to them? They change. They're different. And they have a story. And then they come back with that story to their community and they tell it. I'm going to close with the closing of my book, because it speaks to this. It speaks to the journey that you're all on, that this book really does invite you to be on. And the epic story of Gilgamesh, an old surviving work of literature, it speaks to every parent's journey. In the ancient Mesopotamian myth, Gilgamesh becomes distressed at the death of his friend Enkidu. Due to his suffering, Gilgamesh leaves home and undertakes the long and perilous journey to search for the secret of eternal life. He endures many trials and tribulations on his quests. He swims to the bottom of the sea and retrieves the plan of immortality. When he resurfaces, he sets it on the ground, and while he bathes, the serpent steals it, and the sacred plan of immortality is lost. Yet as he travels home, he has his story to tell. So what does the hero find? On his journey, he finds the elixir of healing wisdom, something that he can share with others. We experience deep pain and develop compassion as we face the depths of our own struggles. And what we find is our story. We sit in groups, tell our stories, and listen to the stories of others. That is the message of this book. That is what I meant when I started with "the question is not the question." It is our struggling children and our willingness to ask different questions that reveal our authentic selves. The hero brings back herself, a richer version, a deeper version of herself. Loving your child is something you cannot not do. You will break and bleed. Old things will die in you, and in their stead, new ones will grow. And what you will have in the end is your story. For me, even as a teacher, the elixir isn't always found in the form of words. Some of what I have gleaned on my journey is difficult to put into words. That is because it is an experience rather than an explanation. You learn something by going through it that you cannot learn any other way. My education and study have given me language. But being present on my painful and beautiful journey have carved out a place for more compassion toward myself and toward others. I am honored to sit and share some of the observations from the thousands of heroes' journeys I have seen children and parents traverse. This is my story. This is my gift. This is also the gift that the remarkable, wonderful, struggling children and parents have given me, and I in turn give it back to you. Thank you.